please welcome Tom Mathias.
Okay, today we're going to do the first presentation in the Parliamentary Procedure in Action program.
We need a chair there.
Now, of course, every organization has a need for order in their meetings. And this has existed for millennia. There was a gentleman named Henry M. Robert, who was an officer in the Army, who was also very civic-minded, who was involved in many organizations, and decided to codify rules of order. In 1876, he did so, and in process of time, the Robert's Rules of Order have been amended and revised. The current issue, or the current manual, Robert's Rules of Order, is in the 11th revision at this point. Part of that process, the parliamentary procedure, is the making of motions. And so this first presentation is going to be on handling a main motion. Now I have a chart of motions, if these could be passed around. We're not going to go over the specifics of the motions, but this is just a reference guide for you, how different motions are handled. Before we get going on the motions, there's some basic definitions that the module suggests that you might want to know. The first is a quorum. A quorum is the minimum number of members who must be present for business to be conducted. A quorum could be a different number for a different organization. Many organizations, a quorum is at least half the membership. Other organizations have a different quorum set up in their constitution. But whatever your quorum is, you must establish a quorum before you can perform business. Also, organizations have a constitution. The constitution contains basic regulations governing the organization, such as the name, the purpose, when meetings are, and what rules of parliamentary procedure might be used. Organizations also have bylaws, which contain provisions for amendment. Bylaws usually don't deal with matters of parliamentary procedure, but mainly the laws governing the organization. There's also standing rules of an organization, which are also usually not parliamentary procedure, but can be changed by a majority of the vote of the membership, or a majority of the vote of those voting. A main motion is a formal proposal by a member of the organization during a meeting to take certain action. Main motions should be specific in nature and may be written down in the case of a lengthy motion. I know that in some organizations they will actually ask that the motion be written down for the secretary's job to be made easier. Other organizations, they might ask you to write the motion down after you've made it, just so that it can be official, so that we know what we're going to talk about. There's also a presiding officer, often a chairman. It could also be a president or a vice president or any other presiding officer that would lead the discussion of the motion. Now, ordinarily there are 6 steps in handling a main motion during small meetings. The first 3 deal with how the motion is brought before the assembly, and the other three discuss how the motion is considered. Those steps are, number one, a member is recognized and makes a motion. Number two, another member without recognition seconds the motion. Number three, the chair formally places the motion before the group by restating the motion. And this is the point at which the motion becomes the property of the assembly and not of the person making the motion anymore. Step four is the members debate the motion, alternating between pros and cons as much as possible. The fifth step is the chair asks if we're ready for a vote and handles the voting on the motion. And the sixth step is that the chair announces the result of the vote and designates appropriate action. Now, step one, a member is recognized and makes a motion. Depending on the organization, this can be handled in different ways. In some organizations, a member may raise their hand and be recognized and make the motion. In other organizations, they may require you to stand, or might even have a microphone where you need to stand. I've been in many different types of assemblies. In a small room like this, the raising of a hand would be appropriate. However, at a political convention, which I've been to a few of, they typically would have a microphone, and if a person wished to address the assembly, they would proceed to the microphone and would identify their name and maybe their position. Like, for instance, at a state political convention, you might say that your name is such and such and you represent district such and such. And then you would state your motion, and then we move to step two. An individual in the assembly would second the motion. And that individual does not have to necessarily seek recognition. They would just state that they second the motion. Generally speaking, the person seconding a motion is also in favor of the motion, but that does not have to be the case. The purpose for having a second is so that a deliberative assembly does not spend time discussing a motion that doesn't have any support from anyone else but that one person, so that one person can't railroad the whole process by continuously making motions over and over again. The third step is that the chair places the motion before the assembly for discussion. And in doing this, the chairman or the presiding officer would restate the motion as it was presented, or may make minor adjustments to the motion with the approval of the person who made the motion, and would then open the motion for discussion. The fourth step in the process is discussion of the motion. After the chairman has restated the motion is put out for discussion of the pros and cons on the motion. Generally speaking, the maker of the motion is given the first opportunity to speak to the motion, to kind of give clarity so that the members of the assembly might understand what they're trying to accomplish by doing the motion. The chairman or presiding officer would then ask if there are any other individuals wishing to discuss the motion. They may ask for those in favor, or they might ask if someone's in favor first and then ask if someone's opposed, to kind of keep the discussion going, alternating, and may at at any point, if they decide that that discussion has gone on long enough, may terminate discussion, or a member, after a certain point, may also make a motion to end discussion. Generally speaking, in organizations that I've dealt with, they usually try to make sure that there's at least a couple in favor and a couple opposed before they cut off discussion. Or they may, at some point when they realize that every person coming forward is speaking in favor, or every person coming forward is speaking against, they may end discussion because they've had enough discussion, and they may call for a vote at this point. When the chairman feels that it's time for the motion to be voted on, they would say, are we ready for the question? Or are we ready to vote? If nobody asks for further discussion, or nobody comes forward to make a motion to vote, the chairman can then call for a vote on the motion. If the motion is made by voice vote, the chairman might say, those in favor say aye, or those opposed say no. If it's by hands up vote, then they would say those in favor, you would raise your hand, and those opposed. Or you may call for a counted vote. If there's a counted vote, after the voting is counted, the chairman or presiding person would state the number voting in favor or the number voting against. Also, if during the vote it sounds like it's unanimous or close to unanimous in favor, they still need to call for those opposed, because those opposed still have a right to be heard. After the vote is taken, the person presiding at the meeting would then state what the result of the vote was, and also what action needs to be taken as a result of the motion. Generally speaking, the presiding person does not vote unless their vote would make a difference. For instance, if the vote was 16 in favor and 15 opposed, the presiding officer could vote in the negative if he wanted to, thus creating a tie vote, and the motion would fail. If there's a tie vote and the chairman is in favor of the motion, they might vote in order to break the tie and make the motion. However, if the motion is a failing motion and the presiding person would not have to vote because the motion is already failing and their vote would only make it a tie, so they would not vote in that case. Now, as part of this module, I'm supposed to demonstrate how to handle the motion. And I didn't ask anyone to make a motion, so is there anyone who would like to make a motion that we could discuss? Dick?
I move that we buy a yacht, a nice 20-foot yacht for the club to use on weekends.
Okay.
Second that.
All right.
The motion has been made and seconded that the club purchase a nice 20-foot yacht, was it?
Yeah, I should have made it bigger, but
20-foot yacht for the use of the members on weekends. Do we have any discussion on the motion? Would our motion maker like to discuss first?
yes, sometimes this is a nice room, but in the summer we should be out in the fresh air, and we could have our meetings on the yacht. We could probably get all of our meetings in during the summer, just meet every week on the yacht.
Yes, Patrice.
I also think that would promote more membership. Lots of people would want to participate in this club.
Yes,
Point
Bill.
of information, how much do we have in our treasury?
Does our treasurer have any comment on our current treasury?
The treasurer says we have $200 in our account.
Okay, so we have $200. Do we have any further discussion? Yes, Judy.
I stand in opposition to this motion because we just cannot afford a yacht. And there's no way we're gonna get a yacht, and if $200 could buy a yacht, nobody would wanna come to that dilapidated
Yes, Mike.
I speak in opposition to the motion, not that it doesn't sound like a great idea, but based on the reasoning that Judy presented, and suggest that it might be appropriate to have a committee to determine alternate methods of how we could entertain ourselves this summer, perhaps even including the possibility of renting a yacht with our $200.
All right, is there any further discussion?
Do we need to second referral to committee?
Do we need to second referral to the committee?
I think the committee could look for foreclosed yachts and
Mr. Parliamentarian, do we need to second that?
Yes,
Yeah.
yes you do.
Do we have a second?
yeah, that'd be
Or
good.
Richard second?
That'd be great.
Okay. Do we need to discuss the referral to committee? I don't hear any discussion. All those in favor of referring this motion to a committee, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say no.
No.
I believe the ayes have it. So that motion has been
Division?
sent to, you want a division? Well then, let's have a rising vote. Those in favor, please rise. All right, and those opposed to going to send in this committee, please rise.
The only one opposed?
All right, it appears that the voting is
Very brave.
in favor of referring this to committee. And that is how you handle a main motion, Mr. Toastmaster.